Hello, and welcome to the How to Make a Podcast podcast. My name is Casey Ruff from Boundless Body LLC, and I am the host of Boundless Body Radio. Before October of 2020, I was not a podcaster. Now, I have recorded hundreds of episodes featuring incredible guests, created tons of helpful content, and have consistently generated thousands of downloads every month since I began. I'm just a regular dude trying to share a message, and now I'm ready to show you my process, my successes and failures, and everything I've learned along the way to help you start your own podcast. Together, we'll explore the entire process of having a podcasting idea and take it all the way to publishing your first episode and explore all the steps in between. Then, I'll give you all the tools that you will need so you can record as many episodes that you want to release after that. Podcasting is one of the most enriching skills I've ever added to my life, and I've learned a ton by talking with some of my heroes and sharing it with anyone who wants to join us on our journey. So, sit back, grab a notebook, take some notes, and welcome to the How to Make a Podcast podcast. Hello and welcome to the How to Make a Podcast podcast. This is your host, Casey Ruff. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. This is now episode number 4. This is going to be a 2-part series. We're going to do 2 of these because there's so much to get through. And this is going to be the lead up to recording your first podcast. So we have talked about hardware. We've talked about software. In the first episode, we talked about, what is your why? When are you going to record? Who are you going to record with? What kind of style of a podcast do you really want to be, which is most appropriate for you? And all of that kind of stuff. And so today we're going to be a little bit more practical and think through some of the things that you will need to get yourself to your very first episode. So first of all, I would just say, right off the bat, you probably need a pretty good name for your episode, and there are a ton of podcasts out there. So finding a name might be a little tricky, but that's kind of where you want to start, is what's something compelling that really highlights your show and kind of the story that you want to tell. Once you find a name, you're also going to want some cover art. We have been extremely fortunate that we work with one of our good personal friends. His name's Austin Hudson. We've mentioned him on the podcast before. He is a designer with Oak Advertising. We will make sure that we link him in the show notes because he has created amazing logos for us. He helped us with the logo for our business. He helped me for the logo for Boundless Body Radio, the podcast that I run. And he also worked on the art for this. And he's done a very, very nice job. He is the kindest dude you'll ever meet and is extremely professional, works really quick, and his pricing is very, very fair. So if you are looking for cover art and you want it to be very, very well done, I would definitely click the link below in the show notes and make sure that you are reaching out to him. He does a fantastic job. I can't say enough about him and his work. Next thing you're going to be thinking about is intro music and or background music. This is if you're going to have a track that plays, as you're doing your introductions, your outros, or if you want something to always be constantly playing in the background. So recently I was featured on the Yeah podcast with John, Abby, and Kate. And they had an audio track that just played at a really low level throughout the entire interview, throughout the entire show, which ended up being about 60 minutes. I don't recall it playing while I was being hosted. I think it's something they must have laid in afterwards, which depending on what audio editing software you're using is an option of something you can do. It's not on the one that I suggested, which is Alitu. Although Alitu will let you create intros and outros that are recorded as extra and then edited back in later on. And so what I choose to do, I showed you this last time. Since I'm using a mixer, all I have to do is hit a button with my pre-recorded introduction that already has all the levels already done for me. Fades down. Hello, there's me. And welcome to the How to Make a Podcast. Very weird to hear me while you're hearing me. So that's how I do it. And then I just manually slide the mixer lower to be a lower level and then finally fade it all the way out when I don't want the music to be playing anymore. So that's kind of doing things on the fly. Now, we do have an outro for the show, And just by making a point of this, what I did is recorded that one separately, and that is one that I import at the tail end of every one of these episodes. So that's one that I use Alitu for. I just drop it right in. It seamlessly blends the two together into one audio track. That makes it really simple for me, and that's my process as far as the music goes. Alitu does have music available, so you can grab music from them, or you can create your own. I know one of the podcasts I helped start, Brian at Rooted in Health, he's a really good guitar player. So he just recorded himself, playing guitar, and it sounds amazing. He did a really, really good job with it. You can also buy music and have it licensed, and so that's what I have done. My Boundless music is something that I paid for. We talked about this in the last episode. So that's that track, and then we also have this one we've now played a few times, which is the track for this podcast. I used a website called Pond 5, and there's so many different ones you can filter down and choose which kind of track fits your theme and fits, again, the story that you're kind of trying to tell. So those are all things you're going to need to be mindful of and make sure that you have a system for doing before you do your own podcast. The other thing we talked about in the first episode was the format, and it's another good time to remind yourself what type of a format are you looking for. So I really prefer having an interview style where I'm asking a guest a bunch of questions that I'm curious about or some of my listeners are curious about, and really like to highlight my guest on our show. This, obviously, platform is a solo show, so I'm sitting here alone talking at you, and I just, record it, do a few small edits when I goof up, and that's how I want to do this. I wanted this to be a little bit more informational, cut to the chase a little bit more. We may end up changing the format of this show down the road if we feel like we want to do like a once-a-month interview or interview other podcasters to add some richness to this show. We may do that at some time. There's also another format that you may want to think about. I'm going to play this here. This is Jayme and Sarah. Jayme's a really good friend of mine. They do a podcast called This Is Your Book Club. And I'm going to just play you a quick clip of their show.
I'm going to start with Not a Happy Family by Shari Lapina.
I just read this one as well.
You did?
I did.
It's kind of newer, but it's like people are talking about it. I was excited to get it.
So I think this is a really good example of a discussion podcast. It's really even back and forth. They talk each about 50% of the time, and they're giving insights on books that they have read, things they're thinking about, their own analysis of different books. And so I think that's a really cool option if you have something specific that you want to talk about, and you have a co-host that you're going to be doing this with pretty consistently. Now, keep in mind, you need to really be crystal clear about your why, which we talked about in the first episode. Why are you doing a podcast? What is your reason? What are you hoping to gain out of this? And like I said in that episode, if you and your friend Shauna come over every Tuesday and get drunk on rosé and want to talk about your crazy kittens, that's totally fine. And if you feel strongly about that, you should do it. But just remember, if you're trying to get that podcast monetized, or you're trying to get, hundreds of thousands of downloads, you need to be really realistic about what you're expecting from that type of a show. For me, I told you my why, not only of doing this show, but also Boundless Body Radio. I wanted to create useful content that I could give to my clients or that could be used all over the world for anybody who wanted to learn more about the topics that we like to talk about. That is my passion project, and it's why I spend so much time and money doing this when I could be off doing other things. So again, just be very, very clear about what your why is and why you chose that, and make that your North Star and always come back to that. And that can help you determine what type of format you're going to be choosing. Another thing that I like to point out and like to have people be really thoughtful about is the length of time that you want most of your podcasts to go. And length of time, for me, I prefer to be a little bit more consistent with it. I know a lot of shows out there will have maybe one short episode, and then maybe they'll do a much longer episode. Daily Stoic is one that we've already talked about that comes to mind, where, it's maybe a longer interview on Wednesdays and Saturdays, but most of the other days it's just a 3 or 4 minute meditation. That's a different style that you can absolutely do. I prefer to keep everything fairly consistent and brand everything that's outside of that consistency as a special episode or a bonus episode. If I do, 2 hours with somebody, I'm going to I'm going to put that as a special episode. I'm going to release it on a different day that's outside of my normal cadence. So people are expecting something that's not our usual 1 hour style interview format. So that's something to be really thoughtful about. These episodes have turned out to be about 20 minutes, give or take. I'm kind of planning on each one of these being, 15, 20 minutes of content. I'll just stop it and pick it up on the next episode. That's just what I've landed on with this one. But be really thoughtful about and think about what you want to do as far as the length of time and how consistent you want to stay with that. Another thing you want to think about when you are thinking about your first episode is the topics that you want to tackle and the difference between a really broad range of topics versus a really specific range of topics. So obviously, if you're going for a general audience, you can talk about a lot more things, but then you're probably not going to have as much attention from the people that really want to zero in on what you want to focus on the most. So I think there's definitely a way to kind of thread that needle between general versus specific. But it's something you may want to think about. It could be something that's really opening yourself up to new topics and a lot of different people, or it could be something, that's very limiting as far as the people that you want to bring onto your show if you are doing an interview show. So a few things to think about there. We like to tell people for Boundless Body Radio that we are a show about health and fitness, but that's a pretty broad range, and we can fit health and fitness into pretty much everybody's story because that's so important. And that allows us to interview a lot of different people about a lot of different topics and always just kind of try to tie it in to health and fitness somehow. So that's what we do over at Boundless Body. We like to keep things really general and really fun, and we've talked to all kinds of people with all kind of expertise around the world, which is great. So if you are deciding to do an interviewing podcast style, you need to decide whether you are going to be the host yourself or if you are going to share the load with another person, another two people, and how you're going to manage that. That's something that you really want to be very thoughtful of while you're getting started, what kind of style that's going to be. I would also say that interviewing itself is absolutely a skill. It's something that has gotten a lot better for me as I've been doing more and more episodes. I'm also using all kinds of instances in my life where I can integrate these kind of skills and practice interviewing people all the time. So this has come really natural for me, which is great because I've been a personal trainer for about 15 years now. And so I'm basically like a hair therapist, and I'm asking questions and interviewing my clients all the time. What are their kids doing? How's work going? How is their car doing? Their favorite sports team, whatever it is. To be a great communicator, I really believe in the power of listening and really asking a question without just trying to think of what is the next thing you're going to ask somebody. And so as far as the interviewing itself goes for me, I try to let our conversations be pretty natural. But I do have next to me a list of potential questions that I may want to ask them or potential topics that I may want to cover with them. Some people go either way on this. There's a lot of people that really appreciate a much more spontaneous conversation. Without really having a topic, you just kind of go and dive in and see where the conversation leads. I've had a few of those, and those work totally great. I've also had ones that I really definitely did not want to miss certain things that I wanted to ask people, or if I had like a guest question, a listener question, or that kind of thing, I really wanted to make sure that it's on paper so I'm seeing it during the interview and I'm reminding myself, okay, I want to ask this question. Let me figure out and feel out where in the conversation it would be the most appropriate to interject that question. By creating questions ahead of time, it has also really helped me to craft questions in a way that is a little bit different or a little bit more thoughtful. I also have a list of questions that I keep here that I've stolen from all kinds of different podcasts that are good general questions that I think you could ask anybody that would elicit a really great response. So things like, what are you grateful for? What is a question you don't want me to ask you, which is from Greg McEwen, Essentialism's, his podcast called Essentialism. It's great. What is your definition of success? Do you consider yourself personally successful? Things like that. And so if I ever get stuck in an interview, I already know other general things that I can ask that would hopefully elicit an interesting question. When I am making my list of potential questions that I want to ask people, I normally find that it's easiest when I'm out walking around my neighborhood. I feel like that's the time where I have the most creativity. and I just dictate. Honestly, I just use the notes section on my phone. I will label it as the name of the person I'm going to interview. I usually try to do something light or funny for the icebreaker. So I'll write out what my opener is going to be. And then I just randomly, as I'm consuming their content, walking around the neighborhood, I'm just reading potential questions into the notes section of my phone. From there, I can print it out. I can look at it during the episode. There will be some times when I will send my guest the potential questions. Sometimes they even ask for them, so they know they're not walking into a trap and you're going to ask them, about elections or politics or, vaccines or something like that, which does come up anyway. Some people prefer not to see them. I know lots of my guests have denied the questions because they didn't want to be too rote with their answers. They really wanted things to be more spontaneous on my end. I also tend to be less spontaneous when I have a highly technical, guest on and I really want to ask questions that elicit an answer in a certain way. But I will also lean a bit more spontaneous if I genuinely don't know something about a topic and I want to learn with the listener. So a good example of this was we have interviewed Brad Kearns 2 times now from Primal Kitchens and the B-Rad podcast, which I would definitely go check out. He does a really, really great job. He's been podcasting forever, so you can tell he's very good. And with him, he plays speed golf. Now, I golf and I know how to go fast in certain things, but I had no idea what the hell speed golf was. And so for that, I really wanted my own innate curiosity to come out during that episode. And I wanted to learn alongside with the guest what the hell speed golf even was. And that was really fun. It helped me to ask, again, those more genuine questions about something that I had no clue about. And it was really nice to be curious and just learn alongside the listener about a topic that I didn't know about. So that is my process. I like to spend as much time as possible researching my people. We're going to talk a little bit more about that next time. I like to spend a lot of time consuming as much possible content as I can. I want to hear the podcast that they're hosting. I want to hear the podcast that they've been a guest on. I want to hear their books if I can get them on audio. And then for as many interviews as they give, I really want to listen in on a diverse amount of those from all kinds of different angles, because I realized really early on in this journey that it's really amazing to find some of your heroes, have them say yes to doing a podcast interview, but then realize that since this person is such a big name in this field, they've already done 8 of these interviews like today. And they might be a little bit fatigued. They might not have as much energy. You may be asking exactly the same questions that somebody else has asked them a bazillion other times. And you may or may not necessarily want to do that. I really, really, really strive to have really unique and different podcasts that other people haven't done, questions they haven't been asked, topics they haven't talked about. Sometimes I'll ask my guests, what's something unique or underappreciated, under talked about that you want to really tackle and discover in our show. And they really appreciate that. And then I will spend as much time as possible researching so I can nail down some unique questions. I'll dig. I hope that I am digging a little bit deeper than other podcast guests to be sure that I have something unique to cover with our guests and make something that the guests are then very proud to, talk about, share it on social media. They end up sharing it with their friends and family. So now you're getting a lot more promotion done for you by your guest. And it's something that they're really proud of and will live on for a very, very long time. So anyway, that was part 1 of getting practically to your first interview. And in part 2, we're going to go further down until the point where you are ready to hit record on your first interview. So excited to be doing this journey with you. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to the How to Make a podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple. Also, be sure to check out the show that made all of this possible, Boundless Body Radio, where we provide tons of helpful and informative content, feature incredible guests, and talk all about health and wellness. Cheers, And thank you for joining us on the How to Make a Podcast podcast.